Okay, Dr. Sane, 7.2, policy revisions on the second reading. And you might want to explain to the new board members that when you say second reading, that means that they've already had a first reading and the board approved them,
Right.
and they're coming up with the changes made for the second reading.
And I thought I would go back, even if you don't mind, just a little further than that and talk about where we get these ideas for policy revisions. I'd love to be able to say that I think of this stuff in my sleep at night and I wake up in the morning and come in and write it down, bring it to you guys, but it doesn't work that way. We do belong to North Carolina School Board Association, and they do monitor the General Assembly for all of the laws that they pass. And in years where they're very busy, as in the last 2 years, they pass all sorts of laws that come back and have impact on our policies. That's not the only way we get policies. There are times when we see a need for a policy because of an action or a misaction that has happened. And when we see a need for reaction or for a policy, then we work with Mark Enriquez or Sarah Stone to write a policy, and they research other districts to figure out what similar policies might be like. We certainly couldn't do it without them. So as you look down your list of policies there, you're going to see, and I try to put in what was the source, and you'll see NCSBA, North Carolina School Board Association, which means they sent me a note that we needed to make this revision. Occasionally the revisions are just recommendations based on interpretation of law. More often than not, it's highly recommended or required by state law, and all of those items come to us. We have a policy committee that meets once a month, except for the month of December. We're going to take that month off. And we have representation from this board on that policy committee. We take the policies to the K-12 principals meetings and sometimes individual principals meetings and assistant principals meetings so that they understand what these policies are and they can enact them. If you've seen the paper policy manual, it's actually 2 notebooks about this thick each. Mark, you don't still carry your notebooks around, do you? Okay. Not anymore. But there was a time, right? And so Mark is the guru on the law, and I take that and what his recommendations are and what the North Carolina School Board Association's recommendations are, and we turn those into policy. So that's kind of how we got from where in the world did this come from to here. So as we look at these policies, and I bring them before the board for first read, and we usually spend a little time on each one if there are questions or significant changes. Sometimes it's just a legal reference. And in a legal reference, I just bring that to you and say we have a required legal reference, and that's all we need to worry about. But boards give me suggestions on wording. We go back and consult the law sometimes. And we get together to try to make policies that will guide our school system in how we administer education in this district. So I want to start with professional and staff development, and this is a North Carolina School Board Association revision. It's been through first read, it's now on second read, and after we read it tonight, if you put it on consent agenda or put it on action agenda, then next time on December the 10th, once you approve it, then it becomes policy for Cabarrus County Schools. It takes me 24 to 48 hours to get that sent back to North Carolina School Board Association and for that policy to get into our particular policy manual, okay? So if we approve something next Monday night and then you go home and look at it, it won't be changed. It takes a couple days for us to do that. All changes in policies will come to you either lined out or new wording will come to you in red, okay? If we make changes twice, the second time new language comes in blue, so you can always identify what the new language is in the policy. And I'll be glad to go over any of these, but I just want to go through. I'm not going to open these up unless you want to discuss something. On professional and staff development, again, this originated from North Carolina School Board Association. It is a requirement to add for us to provide the technology staff development for teachers so that they would be able to use technology in the classroom. Are there any questions about policy 1610 7800?
I just have one thing,
Yes, ma'am.
where you've got in addition as required by, you got policy spelled wrong.
Oops.
3220. That's the only thing that I see on that
We
one.
sure do. We'll change that, no problem. Okay, thank you.
And on these policies, board members, since we won't do from front to back or right to left on these, if you have a question while Dr. Sain's going through it, just key up so that I'll see that you're ready, and then I'll recognize you at that time.
Okay,
Barry, do you have?
It's more of a comment.
sure.
We have this huge policy manual. Some of it's applicable to teachers and teacher assistants. Some of it's not applicable to that level. Some of it's applicable to Lynn and his group and you. How do you do refresher training, and do you have a process in place to keep people abreast of the changes and that type of thing? What is the process that you
Right.
have for keeping people abreast of policy changes and all?
Mark does an intro at the beginning of every year to policy changes, and then my process is somewhere in between first read and second read, I do let the principals take a look at it. If they have any questions or any suggestions, then we make amendments for it. And then when it's passed, it goes out in an email to them saying that the following change has been enacted.
Do you record that, like if it's effective for a teacher, like there's one coming up on lesson planning, which is a teacher related, which means the
Right.
teachers have to have that lesson plan available to anybody, to their principal
Yeah.
that comes by at any moment in time.
Well,
Are they
yeah.
going to be, is there a refresher on that to make sure that they're updated every so many years on that requirement?
Right, and the only thing new in that particular policy, that's been a requirement for a number of years, and the only thing new in that particular one is the need to identify what instructional technology you're using. So the policy has been the same for years. We're just adding instructional technology to it.
Right, I understand that, but
Yep.
will the teachers go through and will you actually record that they've now familiar with, have read the policy and now, I mean, now I
Yeah.
come from a quality system environment and, whenever we did policy changes, you had to go through and make sure everybody was abreast if they were affected by that policy or.
We put together a PowerPoint that we send to principals. It's part of my presentation to them, and they share that with teachers. But at this point, we have not had the need to make people sign saying, yes, I was there on the day you showed this PowerPoint, and yes, I understand that. I guess that's something that we could do, but we place a responsibility on the principal to inform the teachers and then to enforce the policy. Okay?
I think too as a practical matter, obviously with that example, if we're getting lesson plans that didn't have that, it would be an opportunity to say, hey,
Absolutely.
our policy requires it. So, generally it's been that kind of an educational process in addition to the law briefing at the beginning of the year. We would review, changes, but that's a once a year process for the kind of the overall changes. We've had big new changes, we've had special presentations on, a major change. We may actually offer training on that if it's a brand new policy or a major change as opposed to kind of the incremental changes that I think are typified in this set, which is just kind of, a lot of them are updates and revisions for new legal requirements.
Absolutely. I think it's our responsibility to share that information and create the vehicle by which the principals can share with the teachers. I don't need all 39 principals or whatever spending time creating all of that on their own. If I can do that for them, we talk through it in the meeting, and then they get a copy of that PowerPoint so that they can take it with them and share.
The one other area where I think we've been aided by technology is now, since it's online, you can actually do, text searching. So if you want to find a policy on, communicable diseases, you don't have to try to figure out, well, what section would that be in, and let me go through a huge notebook. You can search for the word
Right.
communicable, and it'll pop up our communicable disease, which is not something everyone needs to reference on a daily basis, but you may need to put your hands on that. And so, because they're searchable, it's easier for everybody, our
Exactly.
administrators and staff and your board attorney, to quickly find things and say, okay, well, what do we have a policy on that? What does it say?
Yeah, we have a whole
That's
new
become
generation of administrators who pull policy as they need it and pull policy when when I share information with them. But it's kind of a just-in-time information for them, and that's the way that they do it. They definitely utilize that searchable part of it. Okay, the second one is dissemination and preservation of policies. This brings,
I
I'm
beg
sorry.
your pardon.
I'm so
May I,
sorry.
Mr. Chairman? So are we saying that these particular policy updates are, I don't mean, are they consequential? Or are they relatively, I don't mean minor, I'm not trying to find the wrong words there, but these are okay to do? Is there any major issues in this batch or this set of policy changes that we're making here? I ask because, very frankly, I don't appreciate being elected, the first reading occurred before we were brought on board, and if it's just a comma change in many of these policies, I'm making a mountain out of a molehill, and I don't mean to do that.
Right,
But in terms of this being the second reading with a brand-new majority brought on the board,
right,
I find it awkward
to approve.
to go forward without deeper consideration. But if it is relatively pro forma here, or just simple stuff, I don't mean to make a big deal of it either.
No, you're fine.
My view, a lot of the School Board Association recommended revisions are fairly pro forma. In other words, they're making changes to reflect a legislative update or a new suggested language. So a lot of those, some of them are required where there's really no discretion. I would tell you as your attorney, you have to do this because they passed a statute that says you now have to include it. So there really isn't a lot of discussion. There are, and sometimes the School Board Association, I'm trying to remember if any of these policies fall into that, there are some optional things. So one of the things we do at a policy committee, the School Board Association may say, you now have to have a policy addressing this, and here's a model, and some of it may have, 2 or 3 options for how you're going to deal with this issue. And that's one thing that the policy committee will have a discussion on, which option makes the most sense, which is most
Exactly.
consistent with what we've done. And we try to usually mention, those options, and obviously, if there's a lot of discussion at the policy committee level, then I think it's something that we would ask the board to, weigh in on and say, well, the policy committee disagreed. I will say, in my experience on the policy committee, 90% are kind of, we all agree, that makes sense, it's a logical way, it's consistent
It's
with what we've done.
required by law.
Or it's required. So there really isn't much discussion at that level. And I don't think, for most of those, I don't think it needs a lot of discussion at the board level. Obviously, they're presented for the board, so I want to, everyone, you're entitled to have a discussion on all of them if you want. I think we usually try to highlight ones where there's actually discretionary decision-making so you can do it. And this first read, second read is adopted for the purpose of, you have a discussion that first time, but also if the public is outraged by, oh my gosh, you've got a new policy that says we have to wear, blue hats to school, that parents can come in and, raise concerns because they heard about it 1 month before it becomes enacted the second. So
Right.
you kind of have that check. As much as anything, I think the purpose of the double read is in case someone was out or someone didn't know about it, you have a public announcement and a vote the first time, and then it goes into effect the second time. So it's to some
Yeah.
extent, second readings are rubber stamp in the sense that, in my experience doing this for a number of years, it's rare to have a big issue on a second read if no one raised it on the first time. But the idea is you have a double step process so you could raise a flag. That's the overall context, but obviously
Right.
if there are issues with any of these, I invite comments. You're
Right.
here and you don't have to approve
And,
any of them.
and trust me, I saved the really meaty ones for January, okay? The real,
And that's what
we've got some really
and
meaty
that's what-
ones
that's-
we have
that's
to
the-
talk
That's the
about.
reassurance I'm
Okay.
hoping to get.
These are, most of these are highly recommended or required,
Yep,
okay?
okay.
And And
Then I would just say that on this first one we're looking at here, the sentence, and provide a program of technology-related professional development to prepare the instructional staff to technology. Does that mean to orient the instructional staff, or
to teach them, to
teach
give them
to
the
train them?
skills that
Prepare
they
is the
need?
wrong word.
Okay,
Forgive me, English major here.
no, that's okay.
Teaches English, and I'll find phrases like that. And also that I greatly respect former member Cindy Furtenball's very precise, keen eye for these things.
I
that
wondered
she,
who was going to take her place.
well, I don't know if I could possibly do so, but she.
No, that's fine.
But she was
That's fine.
always very keen
Yeah.
about things like that.
She
I think we just
But
found
I
our
will
policy
not pick
committee
it-
member.
I will not pick individual things like this
Okay.
all the way through these.
Okay, okay.
Thank you, and I do appreciate the value of a second read.
Yeah.
I just don't feel comfortable, again, it being our first read, even though it's the board's
Right,
second read, per
and
se.
you would have the right as a group to say, you know what, I want this to have a third read, and I'm okay with that. I mean, this is, I'm just sharing information that's come back from the National School Board Association and all of these policies, their recommendations, and we put it through the policy committee. Carolyn is a member of that policy committee, and, you know, if you get to something that you just don't feel comfortable with, you say, Colleen, just hang on to that for another week. And as a matter of fact, we've had folks say, take it back to your policy committee because it's awkward or it's weird or, you know, okay? So I'm good to go with that anytime, all right? All right. Dissemination and preservation of policies. This allows us to be electronic. It does require us to keep a couple of paper copies of the policies available for inspection by any member of the public who would like to do that. But pretty much it is allows us to catch up to the 21st century and do what most of our board members last time asked us to do, which is don't give them any more pieces of paper. The lesson planning. This was a requirement by the North Carolina School Board Association that we include technology. Yes, sir? Oh, did you have a question about that?
I had a question about that second.
I'm sorry.
On the second paragraph, in the middle of it, you say the board will endeavor to keep both the electronic policies on the website and the physical policy manual. And then
Right.
in the subsequent paragraph, or within that same paragraph later on, you say the superintendent shall ensure each board member and the board's legal counsel shall have available to him a copy of the policy manual. Should that be the board or its designee, rather than, because we're really not responsible for the website or any of that dissemination, but it makes us look like we're responsible to keep these electronic policies on the
Yeah.
website, and we really have no bearing on that.
Ultimately, as the governing board, you are responsible for what I do.
Okay.
I mean, Mark, ultimately, that's it, and if I don't do it, if I don't keep it current, then you need to hold me to task on that.
I don't disagree with that. It just says the board will endeavor,
Okay.
but it seems like that's putting the action on us rather than on a designee,
How would you
because
like
we're not
that?
going to do it ourselves,
How would you like that worded?
or designee.
I actually think that may be a duty, although we've got it as a board, that actually the superintendent, it should probably say,
yeah.
the superintendent shall endeavor to keep both electronic as opposed to the board. I think you're
Because
right,
the black,
Mr.
the
Shoemaker.
black in the next paragraph, or
Yeah.
the next sentence says that, so that's.
Yep.
Okay.
And I do think that's actually,
Yep.
you're right, that's not the maintenance of the policies is the superintendent or his designee, which is a phrase you'll see in a lot of our policies and may belong there as well. We could say superintendent or his designee, i.e. here Colleen, or her designee would be the ones that would actually do the
Okay.
maintenance of it. I agree. I think that probably shouldn't be the board. I'd agree with Mr. Shoemaker.
And what you will see is when this comes back to you next week, you will see those changes reflected, okay? And when they come back to you, if there's anything that you need to let me know about, if you'll let Lynn Shue know what your questions or concerns are, then he'll forward them and we'll be glad to get them back to everybody. Okay, dissemination of policies. Any other questions about that one? Can we go on to lesson planning?
I have a question about this one. Now, you said that this is required by a change in state law, or is this just a recommendation?
This one. I'm looking through my notes and, number 6, okay, that's number 5. I guess at this one, it looks like it might have been highly recommended.
Okay, well, I have problems with this one.
Okay.
That not, it's important, yes, of course, we need to integrate technology into the planning process and into the teaching process, but this is, yet another example where we are asking for teachers to do one more thing and not taking something off of their plate at the same time. And the accumulated effect
Right.
of all of these things that we ask teachers to do for a good cause means that at some point, something slips, because you can't keep doing everything you used to be doing and adding new tasks and do them all excellently. I also feel that if we want to be one of the top 10 school districts in the state, we shouldn't just have the same policies that all 115 school districts in the state have, because that's a recipe for being average.
I don't think we do.
The only way that you can get to be top 10 is you have to be a pace setter. And I think one of the ways that we can be a pace setter is that we can try to make more time available for our teachers by taking away planning or documentation tasks that add little value to the overall process. And so that's a comment. My question for you is, there's another part of the process of the policy that's not being revised. It just says that there is a goal
Right.
that teachers will have 5 hours per week of
Right.
scheduled just for planning. And I was wondering how well we as a district are doing in providing that 5 hours a week for our teachers.
Correct. I think we're doing extremely well in middle school and high school. I think the biggest challenge is in elementary school. And the reason I say that is elementary specials are 30 to 45 minutes long. They don't change classes, so I cannot guarantee that the entire 5th grade is going to 90 minutes of specials classes during that time. We don't have the staff support for that. We have relied on the principals to be very creative in how they do that. Jason probably can help answer this a little bit better than I can. But when I was a principal, we used staff development money to hire subs to come in so that we would give teachers a half-day planning once a month to work with their team. They sometimes can double up in PE if the teacher assistant goes with that class, so you could have 2 teachers so they could double up on their encores that day, PE and music back to back. That's one of the ways that they do it. It's difficult. I will tell you that it's very difficult in elementary school to meet that goal. So, and as we get larger and larger schools with art, music, and PE, or what we call encores or special classes, and as we get larger and larger, it becomes more and more difficult for that principal to achieve that goal. Do you want to speak?
Yeah, I would reiterate that, the challenges in the elementary school. So just some background information. In all of our high schools, every teacher gets 90 minutes a day of planning, which is about 25% of their day is spent planning, if you think about that. So let's kind of put that in context. A high school teacher, there's 4 classes per day in a high school. They teach 3 out of 4. They get 90 minutes of planning. Typically, a high school teacher has 1 to 2 preps, which means they have 1 to 2 classes that they teach. Now, the flip side is they have more kids, right? So they teach about 90 kids instead of an elementary teacher that teaches 25 kids. So they do have to manage the paperwork of about 90 children at a time. Our middle schools vary from site to site depending on the type of schedule that they run, but at a minimum, all of our middle school teachers receive at least an hour a day of planning. Middle school teachers also carry more student load Some of our middle school folks are carrying upwards of 100 students, sometimes more than our high schools because they run a 5-period or 6-period day depending on what the school has chosen. So, a middle school teacher is going to have between 90 and I'd say 120 max students that they carry every single day, which means they got to grade all those papers, they got to prepare lessons. But in the middle school, typically your middle school teachers again, have 1 to 2 preps. So they're teaching the same thing, the same class, the same content every day 5 different times. Our elementary school folks, that is a significant challenge. So an elementary teacher, 25 kids, so they don't have as many children, but they teach every single class, right? And they have very little planning time. And I would agree with Mr. Phillips. If we want to be a top 10 district in the state of North Carolina, our elementary folks need time and space to reflectively plan for their lessons. That is essential for them to get ahead of the game and not, get in the rat race of just preparing for the next day. How do we deal with that? How do principals deal with that? Principals deal with that in a variety of different ways. Some are better at it than others, quite frankly. But they do involve the staff, and they do involve what's called the school improvement team to create their schedules. Some of the ways they try to create that time and space is what Dr. Sane was saying. They create a double block of time so that maybe one day they have 90 minutes, some time and space to kind of regroup and refresh themselves, and they'll give that up on the next day. They might teach a full day the next day, except for recess and things like that. Another piece of this puzzle is the way we use our teacher assistants. And so that's a choice at the school level. How do I use my teacher assistants? I could use my teacher assistants to give teacher planning time, or I could use my teacher assistants for small group instruction. And many times that's where the teachers kind of land is, gosh, I'd really like to have my teacher assistant in the room so I can do and facilitate this small group instruction. At the end of the day, it does come down to some resources, and much of that is in the specials area. So if we choose to provide more what we call encore music, art, PE time for our elementary folks, will go a long way in providing that time for our elementary teachers. But you're right, our policy says 5 hours a week. Our elementary teachers, on average, get about 2.5 to 4 hours a week, depending on the different week. Yeah.
That strikes me as an awfully large discrepancy between what high school and middle school teachers get and what elementary school teachers get. And I wonder if that's reflected in a higher attrition rate among elementary teachers. I would think, particularly if you're just starting out, having to teach all of these classes and having a half hour of planning time seems a little unfair. So I would recommend tabling this change and would suggest that we come back with some kind of a policy change that talks about what we're going to do to address this issue that you brought up about providing adequate schedule for elementary school teachers.
Any other comments? Okay, David.
Again, David, be brief, as best as you can. I knew I liked Mr. Phillips before we were elected. I like him all the more now. Earlier, Ms. Klutz talked about expansion in the budget and more or less a zero-sum type of expansion. You couldn't increase one budget without decreasing some other budget. And the parallel to me is useful here. If we're going to increase some policy, wouldn't it be nice to rescind, get rid of, grandfather, remove some other policy so that there's a balance? I know that's pie in the sky maybe as well, but to continually add policies without assessing other policies that no longer have as much value would be a nice approach to our process of updating the policies. A continual reassessment of the whole or the holistic view of the policies would be really nice as we improve certain
Right.
policies.
Right.
But to also
And we
make a wise and judicious assessment of other policies as well.
And we do delete policies on occasion, I will tell you that.
I would love to see that often.
Okay.
I would love to see that
But the
quite
po-
often,
Right, but.
where we strike a policy completely.
Right.
If that is, again, possible, judicious, prudent, and wise.
I would love to lighten the load, no doubt about it. Anybody else on that one?
Well, Dr. Sane, as you see in the bottom, it references and cross-references many policies on the bottom. So we would have to look at the policies that are referenced on the bottom to see how this one would affect those policies. So we are going to have to look at those policies that are cross-referenced on the bottom to see.
I think what you're looking at is an attempt to put into policy the movement towards using technology as much as you have and as much as is appropriate in classroom instruction. And I think it's been stated that we value technology and we value the impact that it has on children. And that at this point in time, that's what the state is trying to do, and that's what we're trying to do.
And the only other thing that, and I'm thinking that we basically need to say that, we are putting into play the Common Core state and North Carolina essential standards.
Right.
I mean, to me, we got to say, I mean, we are doing that.
Right.
And that's something that we've got to put in there. That's something we are doing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's a statement I feel, I mean, that we need to put in there. But there again, I would want you to bring back to see if those other, I mean, they're saying 3,000, 3,001.
Right.
I mean, are we going to have to do something on those other ones if we do not do this?
Yeah, it depends on how it references those. Okay?
So if we
Yeah,
could check that.
We'd have to look at that and determine whether or not that would cause a change. My thoughts are probably not that we're cross-referencing just so that we can make the connection that in this policy it says we value technology. Mark, feel free to jump in.
I did. I looked at 3220, and I do.
Yeah.
I mean, it talks about the importance of technology, but it doesn't specifically reference
Right.
lesson plan.
Right.
So I think you could go either way. And I looked at the statutes too. I think this is one the board has discretion on requiring it in lesson plans or not requiring it in lesson plans. Yeah, I think that is a decision. That's
What about the course,
board can make.
what about the statement at first about the Common Core state and North Carolina essential standards? Would we have to put that in? Yeah, the first line up at the top. Since we are implementing that, would that be something that we would have to put in there, that we are implementing that? I mean, that's something we are implementing.
We do have to implement the Common Core
Yes.
standards. That's
And
not
I
optional.
know we
But
are implementing that, but do we have to put that in?
The question is whether you would have to reference that in the lesson plans. My thought would be, that you have two main, and I welcome input, Kathy Auger or Colleen, but my understanding on lesson plans, you've kind of got two main goals, at least as I see it as your attorney. One is a performance-related issue, which is you look at lesson plans to make sure the teacher has thought out the plan for the class, is teaching the appropriate material, and has a way to get there. The other is the practical implication, which is when a substitute comes in, because someone's absent, they need those lesson plans. And so they need to know what's being taught, how it's being taught, so they can come in and smoothly take over. And I think that's the issue. You know, I think, should the lesson plan be based on Common Core, since that's what we're teaching? It would seem to me it makes a lot of
To
sense
me,
to
we
reference
need
it there as a way to make sure we are in fact covering Common Core. If you find a math teacher that's not matching up with Common Core, that would be something that you would look to on a, at a corrective level to say, hey, your math class isn't teaching what we need to teach under the Common Core. And the way you'd often assess that is, show me your lesson plans. Are you in fact driving towards these objectives that we've told you have to drive to? So that's my thought. And I think the thought, and I'm trying to remember if we even really discussed it at length at Policy Committee, I think the issue for the board's decision is is the use of technology important for a substitute to come in, or an important measure of how we're going to try to evaluate the teacher? And how does that balance with the additional load on the teacher to have one more thing they have to do? I think that's the kind of policy decision that the board probably needs to wrestle with, is the pros and cons of adding that requirement.
Mr. Chairman, does it make more sense? Well, I'm sorry, were you going to?
I was just going to add one comment. One thing that might be helpful for the board to take a look at prior to the next meeting would be the teacher evaluation instrument that's required by the state. And I was just going to share with you where that's located. If you go onto our website into the departments in the human resources section, it's divided, and go into the documents. There's a section called toolboxes, and there's a toolbox for teacher evaluation. And the teacher process manual is on there, and there is a section on planning and technology that's within the evaluation instrument itself. So just, that might be a good reference just to look at outside of here.
Can you send an email with that?
Absolutely.
I guess, Mr. Chairman, what I was. Oh, I'm sorry.
No one.
Oh, I didn't know I was keyed up. I was not keyed up at first.
Can you unkey? Mr. Kiger had a comment.
Well, I guess the comment I was going to make was that if it's a recommendation and we've got this much question about it, does it make more sense to just send it back to the policy committee, let them figure out, then Dr. Sain can come back with the administration's recommendation to us, and then we can go from there. And if it sounds like something that needs to be addressed in a big, broader sense, as Mr. Phillips has talked about, then let's by all means have that conversation and and then go from there.
Sorry, I will be glad to take any of these that you find troubling back to committee, and we'll review them and come back to you at a later time, okay? We're good with that.
Okay. Dr. Sain, Mr. Shoemaker had a comment or question.
Yeah, I hear all the discussion, but one thing is you've used this word effective, very subjective word. So I would, for all intents and purposes, I would remove that word and just say use of. And because now you're adding a lot of subjectivity to what is effective, but and I wonder if you couldn't put use of technological resources up in B or something like that rather than having a separate bullet for it. I mean, that's where I think that Mr. Kiger's suggestion is probably a good one, to just have a real look-see at this one. And
Dr. Sain, what we might need to do, and board members, we're looking at 13 or 14 different policy on the second reading, and we've covered 2 into the third one now. And I realize this is your first chance to look at these, and I realize you got questions and concerns and all of that. So what I'm going to recommend, and this is something that I've never done before, but under these circumstances, I'm going to recommend that you go ahead and just go through these and give us the highlights of what's being changed. And then between now and the 10th, we'll just action item all of these until the 10th. And then between now and the 10th, any questions, any concerns that you have on these policies, get them to me or to Dr. Sain. Well, if you send them to Dr. Sain, send them and copy it to me. Email it to Dr. Sain, copy it to me. And then between now and the 10th, we're going to have your answers for you. And if it requires going back to the policy council, then we'll send it back to the policy council. But otherwise, we're going to move on. We're going to move on with these. Because otherwise, we're going to be here at about 2 o'clock in the morning. Did anybody bring their breakfast? Okay. So for the sake of the time and respect for the other board members, we need to just go ahead and move through them and move on, because we got other items we need to discuss, and so we need to move forward.
Right.
Dr. Sain.
All right. Parental inspection and objection to instructional materials. This was a revision, and what it does is basically it changes the wording and eliminates the use of textbooks and supplementary materials. The materials that are used in instruction are instructional materials, and it paves the way to move away from textbooks. And so that if I choose to use an article out of Time magazine or an article out of another magazine or off the internet, it becomes an instructional material. And parents have the right to request to review those and to contest those. So that's pretty much it. The second thing I think that the media specialists will be really happy about is it reminds principals that just because there is an objection to a book, we do not automatically remove it from the shelf. And our media specialists felt very strongly about that. The next policy is testing and assessment. Okay. This is policy directs us to transition to the new online testing. That's pretty much the gist of this particular policy. And it directs the superintendent or his designee to have a plan to move towards online testing. And I can tell you that our system has been working towards that for the past year. So this policy is only telling us what we're already doing. Test assignment to classes, and this is a legal requirement. There's a couple things in here that are requirements, and that is that the parents of multiple birth children can request within the first 5 days of their attendance at school that these children be placed in the same classroom. And the principal has to meet with them, and they have to discuss it. In the end, this takes away a principal's right to grade in place, which is one of their long-held rights about putting children in a classroom, and says that the principal has to at least try it for one marking period. If at the end of that marking period we see that there's significant disruption to the class because Johnny, Susie, and Harry fight all the time and cause a disruption in the classroom, or one dominates the others and it's not healthy for that child, then the principal can, at that point in time, with good reason and conversation with the parents, override that. The second thing it does is it requires us to match as closely as possible any students who are transferred into our district whose parents are part of who are with the military, and that they come in and they tell us that they're an AIG student. We go ahead and treat them as an AIG student. Or they come from a school that is a STEM school, we automatically, to provide the most stability we can for that child who obviously is going through a lot, if his parents are deployed or if they're moving around a lot, that we try to match that schedule and that placement as well as we possibly can. The only difference would be is if that addition of that child, and this goes with the twins too, causes us to have to reorganize a classroom, which means they're in grades K through 3, and they're the 25th or 25th child in the classroom, we'd have to reorganize, then we can say no, okay? So that's kind of what that one is. Criminal behavior, this is, in the past we have been required to report anything we had a reasonable suspicion of that was a crime. And my guess is that the court system couldn't define reasonable. So now it has changed to say that if we have knowledge that there's been a crime committed, we're required to report it to the police. Schools and communities, this one requires us to publish on our websites, which we already do, the data that's required by the State Board of Education, by federal guidelines for Race to the Top, as well as other state guidelines. This is something we already do. Relationship with law enforcement, and this deals with young people who have court counselors who come into the school. There's been times in the past where court counselors have made an assumption that they don't necessarily have to follow visitation policies and visitor policies. And so what we're doing is we're saying that when you're a court counselor, you have to sign in the front office. You have to, the people have to know that you're there and why you're there, and you have to follow all of our visitor policies. Ethics in the purchasing function. This one and employee conflict of interest, and gifts and bequests all require us to follow the same ethical rules when dealing with E-rate vendors that we have to follow with any other vendor that we deal with.
Want to tell them what E-rate is to that maybe, or I
I'll
can.
let Kelly tell.
E-rate, I don't
Michael
mind. E-rate is a special funding program where you get some federal assistance for some technology programs. We
Right.
can give you the longer answer, but it's
a return.
another option for funding, and we're required now by law to make sure that the same ethics rules apply to those forms of purchases.
Okay. And I'll be looking forward to your emails. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Sain, I had two more, a couple of more here. Let's see, employee conflict of interest. Let's
That's
see.
right.
It's just got, there was two or three more on here. I don't know
Right,
if you
and
just
those were
overlooked
all
those.
with relation to E-rate.
Okay,
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 yeah.
okay, all right, well, that's good then. So,
Sorry, I bundled three in one.
yeah, you did, and I wonder why you did that, but they're all E-rate. And so, board members, if you will, look these policies over, get your questions to Dr. Sain, copy it to me, and if you want to send it to the other board members for them to look at, that's fine. We can all look at it and respond as we need, as we need to. But we want to, when we come together on the 10th, though, we want to be able to move this from the action to an approval, or back to the action, or back to the policy committee or somewhere, because we'll have to move on it on the 10th. Okay? All right, thank you, Dr. Sain. Now, we're going to move to 7.3. This one will be a rather quick one, because if you remember, those of you that were here last time we met, Mr. Wicke got detained at the commissioners' meeting, and he wasn't able to be here for the discussion that we were going to have on the ORED consulting services. So at this time, we need to have a motion, and since Ms. Carpenter was the one that made the motion to table this on the 19th of November, she'll have to make the motion to untable it, removing it from the table, and then I think Mr. Kiger was the one that seconded that. So we'll need to take this off and then vote on it, and then we'll move on to 7.4. So do I have a motion that we remove from the table the ORED consulting services?
I make a motion that we untable it.
Okay, I have the motion.
And I will second that.
Okay, and all those in favor say aye. Okay, now the item 7.4 is untabled. We got Mr. Whitkey and Dave Burnett here at the podium, and they're going to talk with us about this this particular item here on the consulting services.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. ORED stands, and I'll read it, the Operations Research and Education Laboratory. ORED has been in existence for many years, and I think overall what they've been able to establish over time is that their projections are accurate, that their analysis is certainly open to and sustaining of scrutiny because of the nature of how they do it. It's a program that is in concert with North Carolina State University and is well respected in the community as well as, I guess, nationally at this point. They've worked for a number of school districts in the state, and the thing that I guess both Dave and I like about not only their proposal but the way they do things is that they really offer a quite independent third-party look at the needs of the school district. So there's once done and once presented to the public and to the district, it's a viewpoint that is not tainted theoretically by individuals. It's not something that is a selling point by the district for certain programs or certain directions to be taken, but it really is an independent and unbiased viewpoint of what the district needs. And this, certainly Dave can talk in detail because he's used ORED in the past, but I think that I would say from what I've seen of the presentation materials and all, that it does give the opportunity to the district to have this independent view so that when people challenge the findings, there's a lot of data, there's a lot of basic data presented that is more than just opinion, it's more than just historical experience, it's data that's based on today's needs and the future needs of the school district. Dave, why don't you fill in all the details.
Sure. Well, the superintendent is recommending that this item be approved. And this, it's a consultant fee, and it's not to exceed $43,500. And what we intend that this will include is enrollment forecasting, land use studies, high-resolution growth forecast, optimal school site locations, optimal school attendance areas, and exploring attendance area scenarios. This is a tool that I've used numerous times in other districts to help with bond planning, to help with student assignment and reassignments as we maybe put in a new school. How's that fit, and what adjustments need to be made with all the student assignment existing zones. Student reassignment is a very difficult thing. I know many of you have not been involved in it, and it's a very emotional item. I have had very good experience with it in the past. The student reassignments that I led were successful. The bond referendums that I led were successful, and I attribute most of that to the data and the process that were incorporated with ORAD.
Okay, board members, I have to assume that you've had access to this, am I right? You've had access to this, and you have understood why, that they're bringing this recommendation to us. And I think it was all instigated whenever we started looking at the possibilities for the land and for the new elementary school in the northwest area. And this particular tool here is supposed to help us make a much better decision on that. So I'd like to give the board an opportunity to ask you some questions, Dave, if they have questions or whatever. And I'll start on Mr. Phillips' side, and we'll work our way down. And remember, the ultimate goal here, action or consent for the 10th, okay?
It says that the budget source is Facilities Management Department, so I assume you've already allocated something in the budget for this?
I'm sorry. Yes. We have identified a funding source. At the time that this was written, we were looking at facilities maintenance dollars. It is quite possible that we have other funding sources within the district that will pay for this.
Okay, so we're not giving up something to do this instead?
No, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Mr. Harrison?
In the recent decisions made concerning Cox Mill and Harris Elementary, and the decisions to direct some children in some neighborhoods to other schools, was ORAD data a component?
It was not available to me at that time.
So this is our first use of this service? So we have no history of this service before. It's a brand-new service that we are discussing?
That is correct. In this district, that is correct.
And this is like a one-year contract, or what's the duration of this arrangement?
The way I use this is a study, and the way I've used this study in the past is that I was able to do the planning, the master planning, and the student assignments for several years in the future. A good way to do this is that in a certain number of years, depending on the growth rates, you would want to do it again. If it's slow growth, then that period of time is longer. If it's a very active and very changing environment, then you'd want to do that sooner.
What other districts in the vicinity use this service?
I was with Union County.
Which others?
I'm sorry?
Which others?
Durham Public Schools and Guilford County Schools.
Three of the 115 in North Carolina?
Those are the ones that I'm familiar with. They have I don't know every single county that they've worked in. I know that they've worked in a lot of school districts. I'm sure we can get that information.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Mr. Walters, you have any questions concerned about ORAD?
Yeah, what exactly do we do now, or what have we done in the past? What data did you have that's different than what these folks here provide?
We have ArcGIS, which is a mapping system, but a lot of the decisions were made by adjusting boundaries based on board recommendations and the problem-solving ability of my predecessor.
I just went to their website. I'm sorry, not do that.
Mr. Walter, can you unkey?
I just wanted to, there was a question about the counties. Their website actually lists all the school districts that they've done work for, and it looks, I haven't counted them all, it's probably over 30 of them, if you want to, they're all in North Carolina. Well, actually, no, there's at least one South Carolina here. If you,
Need to key up, Mr. Harrison.
that's okay.
Okay.
I beg your pardon. So the point is that it is a well-vetted service?
Based on the information from their website, it appears that they've worked with a number of different school districts in North Carolina.
Mr. Walter, did you get your answers?
Not yet. I'm just looking through the list of stuff, and it just seems to me that a lot of this stuff's already available. I mean, as far as GIS and land uses, it's already available with the county. School building capacities, we've already have that information. It's, for 43,000 is the recommendation. I think there's two plans here. One's a lesser amount.
And their proposal is not to determine our building capacities. Their proposal would be in concert with our requirements and our goals and our policies to put the right number of students at the building. So
Sure.
if we have a building with a capacity of 1,000 students, and we said that we wanted to optimize the utilization of every single school, then the computer program really would be matching the right number of students based on those capacities. So it's not determining what our building capacity is, but it is putting the students at those locations.
On numbered space, that's not, okay. I mean, I'm okay with the data. I don't think that we need to go through. Okay, I think it should go, doesn't need to be on a consent agenda.
Okay, you're saying you're for your part, you want it to go on the action item? Okay, all right. All right, Mr. Kiger.
I'm fine.
Ms. Carpenter.
And my question kind of lies the same way. I'm kind of looking at the comparison between option 1 and option 2, and you're still generating where you're looking at the school site and attendance boundary scenario in option 2, and you're getting that for $17,500 compared to $43,500, and where I'm kind of coming from. What am I getting for that extra $26,000? Tell me what extra, you know me and my pennies. I want to know what I'm getting for that $26,000 between that option 1 and that option 2. I want my bang for my buck. Now, because I'm getting that planning, and I know that that GS land use, I'm getting that from the county. They bring that to me all the time. I can trot down there and get it for you if you want me to. I don't mind. And so, I know with the optional site planning, and we're getting that in 2. So what am I getting for that $26,000?
You get a great deal of planning information, and it's long-range planning.
The only thing I'm seeing that they're giving me extra is April and May of 2013, because date-wise, they're giving me the other stuff. But all I'm seeing extra compared to that option 2 is that April and May, if you look at the difference when I'm kind of comparing that. Right. And for 2 months, I can't see giving them $26,000. These other guys make in, but I can't. But you got to really, breaking it down, they got to show me something a lot more for that much difference.
Yes. you can get the optimal site location for either location, for either option. And that is certainly one of the things that we were very interested in. But we're also very interested in the long-range planning. And that, to say a land use study is something you can get from the county, you get some information from the county. But what this study proposes, that they really will be going out and looking and interviewing with various folks. It's going to be within the organizations, authorities having jurisdiction. They'll be talking with the zoning folks, looking at the densities. They'll be looking at the commercial, industrial, residential, what those densities are. And they'll be looking at water, sewer, roads, and all of those are going to be interviews with folks. They can read the plan, but they'll be talking with the folks to see what's not on the plan.
I think one of the things, if I might just add, Dave, is a lot of this work has historically been done by staff, but I can tell you that what has not been done by staff is really the physical plant analysis well into the future as impacted by new school construction. I think one of the things that worries both Dave and I is we all, as a site selection committee, are sort of putting our finger on the map saying, that looks like a good place to build a school. But that's the degree of information we have at this point in time. What I see is in their offer of services is that you have a very, it's a data-based, computer-driven analysis of many, many factors in terms of where you should be looking to site schools, not only today, but well into the future, where the population is going, where the industry is going. These are all things that we can gather, but it takes a great deal of time and research. We have a limited number of staff. We have ongoing daily chores that we do. I would recommend them from the standpoint that they are a consultant, they are an adjunct to our staff, and an adjunct to this board in terms of gathering the information, but they're also expert at presenting it. And I think that's key in terms of making the community and taxpayers feel comfortable in the long-range decisions that this board makes.
But are they going to do assumptions? And that's what frightens me.
They don't do it without your input.
But one of the things, because one of the things being on the land committee, we have, assuming water and sewer is going to be there, we're not assuming that because we know what problems. We don't have the money for the water and sewer. We can't wait for the water and sewer because we're needing the school now. We don't need it 5 years from now because we've got the children now. We don't have them 5 years from now. And we don't have what it would cost for a 5-foot water main or whatever it is. We don't have those things. Is this company going to assume these things and tell us we should put it here when we don't have the money for this? I mean, I know I may be asking a question you can't answer, but if I'm paying for this information, it's going to be information that's not going to be useful for me because they're going to give me a site that's not going to be useful for me right now because I can't build there right now.
Carolyn, let me go back and tell you that Jim, for years, kept a 10-year plan, a 15-year plan, and a 5-year plan, right?
Yeah.
A building plan. And when the recession hit, all those plans went crazy, okay? And actually, they were put up on a shelf, and they haven't been reviewed. Meanwhile, our county has grown, responsibilities have grown, and we have reduced staff, to be honest with you. You saw the information I had to put together for the little bit of redistricting that we did.
Mm-hmm.
That took all of my time during that time to do that. If you want a complete study of, and it probably should be done every, 10 or 15 years. If you want a complete study to validate the work that staff is doing, this is the way to go. If we go back to the birth rate numbers, back before the recession hit, we should have about 35,000 students right now. But we don't. We're just topping 30 because the economy tanked and people quit moving. So what we're saying is because the work was not kept up with and the work was not, there was no reason to do that work for a while, that we need a fresh start on this and we need a jump start. And either you need to hire this company or you need to hire me, an employee, to do that. And I think you're going to get out a lot better information and a lot cheaper price than hiring an employee that works between Lynn and myself to pull all this information together. And then we will have recalibrated all of our numbers, all of our plans, and we'll be ready to go again. But I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we need this for validation and recalibration of what we have.
I agree, absolutely.
Okay, sorry.
Well, and my main thing is, I just want to make sure between those difference, what we're really getting, because all I'm seeing was the main thing was those 2 months, and that's why I'm wanting to make sure that we are getting our money's worth between those two options.
Thank you, Ms. Carpenter. Mr. Shoemaker, you have your comments.
Yes, I didn't see your presentation, but just going through this thing, when they conduct these land use interviews, are they going to go to each one of the cities and figure, because we have land use plans all over this county, but of course Kannapolis hasn't adopted any of the plans, as you well know. So they're kind of marching to their own beat. Are they going to interview each of the cities and how they're expecting their growth rates and what they're looking at so we can get a better understanding of that? Because if we were to hire an employee, then that person would have to go out and do those types of interviews anyway and spend a lot of time in their back pockets. The out-of-capacity table with the 10-year membership forecast, what is that going to do for us?
What you will see is enrollment forecast per school, and that is a very valuable tool. As you look, and you'll see that Odell's going to be exceeding capacity again in year XX. You'll know that you need to be taking care of that school and how are you going to do it. You'll be looking at the schools in that region, find out when they're going to be over capacity. Again, depending on how far you go with the program, it'll be telling you when you need a new school and where it needs to be. That's going to handle those issues. And Dr. Sain had reminded me of something that is very crucial to this discussion of option 1 versus option 2. The option 2 was really just localized. It was just for the northwest area of the county to pinpoint that school. But option 1 really was district-wide, and that gives us a much better view of the county and all of the needs.
So option 2 is basically, it says generate optimal school site, that's a singular, attendance boundary scenarios, whereas in the membership forecast, you're looking at potential sites or things, or sites over a period of time where growth is going to be impacting, or at least projecting to impact us.
Right. The way they do that is they'll have, it's a color-coded chart, and it's green, with enrollment projections for, the next 10 years if it's within capacity. If it's going to exceed capacity, they'll do 2 years of yellow, which is caution. You need to be on alert. You need to be coming up with plans. Either it's mobile classrooms, or it's a student assignment change, or it's a new school. And then it goes into red when you exceed your capacity and you've lost all your flexibility at that school.
All right, I have some more questions. It says collect school building capacity data, including renovations, closing, openings. Does this include telling us exactly how many mobile units will be allowed at any of our schools?
No, and
will it give us some of those capacities so that we can bridge the gap until we do have structures in place?
We already have that information.
You have that
We
already?
do. As far as the mobile units go, yes, sir.
I mean, like Boger. Boger, I don't know what the number is, but
I have it on a chart. I can share it with you.
Okay.
It's all fully available.
The other part is in the 10-year forecast, will it also identify infrastructure shortfalls, such as water, sewer, and any of the other
That would be a capacity limitation for a particular area, residential growth. And so that would be involved in the projections. So a particular area that might be growing very fast but has a sewer capacity limitation, there'll be a cap for that projection. When they anticipate that capacity would be reached and that there would be no further development, the projections would reflect that.
Okay, and then this land use study report would just be them coming to us to talk to us about the details in their report?
They would be providing you a report. They'd be coming here, answering any questions that you have.
And if we were to go with the first option, how often would you recommend that we update this
It's time
forecast?
will tell. If growth is nice and steady and manageable, again, you don't need to redo it that often. But if growth were to take off quickly, and then you would want to do it more often. So really, I would say we will go through several years, and we'll see how the development's going, how growth is going, and how well the study is holding up over time. But there is a point where it's not going to be effective, and that may be more than 5 years. But we'd have to look at what the conditions are at that time.
The next question is if we were to do this in-house, what kind of person would you need to hire to give you this type of analysis?
A planner, a demographer, GIS person, who does all of those things, all those skills. But
Or is there a possibility of some synergy with the county's existing county GIS department? Are there options are available with those folks?
GIS is a tool.
Yeah, but I mean, they have a
GIS.
very comprehensive group over there under Susie Morris and her folks.
Well, as Mr. Whitkey had mentioned previously, when you do a student assignment and you're making changes, that is a very emotional time. It is a very difficult time for most people involved. And having a independent third party who has no vested interest in this, I found to be very helpful in my past. And folks, the community really wasn't able to shoot holes through the data, and that was very valuable. It made it a difficult process much easier to manage, much easier to live through, and I think I can say that for all parties involved.
Okay. Now, the funding, you said that you could cover it, but not using maintenance dollars. Where would we get the funding from?
Fund balance.
From the fund balance?
Yes, sir.
What does that mean? Because I don't know what a fund balance is.
It's fun. You
Yeah.
have fun with it.
It's like a savings account, if you will.
Okay, so this is part of the month or so reserve. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shoemaker. Thank you, board members, for your comments and my comments on this. We've never, to my knowledge, and I've been, this is 12 years for me, 10 on the board, but 12 years associated with the school system. We've never done a comprehensive land study of this type. And shame on us, to be honest with you, that we hadn't done this at some time in the past already. But as I had mentioned once before, when we were talking to a couple of the commissioners about this, and that was, we've done a pretty doggone good job in the past. I mean, since I've been on the board, we've done 8 elementary schools, 3 middle schools, and 3 high schools, and numerous renovations since I've been a board member. And we've done most of that without a comprehensive land study and all of that. But as you mentioned, between the shortages of personnel and there's no way we're going to get caught up anytime soon. If we had approval from the commissioners today to build the elementary school, we hadn't even bought no land yet. It's going to be 3 years before we could get it. But guess what? During that 3 years, the children are going to keep coming. And we've got to know where they're coming more than just we think they're coming here, because we look at building permits, we look at what projections they have made, we look at the state core capacity chart, the cohort chart, which is pretty doggone close, but we're behind on that, though, because of the decrease in the economy in 2008. So we're behind on where we're supposed to be, as Dr. Sain had already said. But we felt so strongly about this that, we had made the mention to the commissioners, and they said, well, we think you ought to pay for that. And we felt so strongly that we needed to pay for it that that's why it's being brought to the board now, is because we feel like it needs to be done. It never has been done. We're talking about a company that has been in business for quite some time, got a very good reputation, and it will give these guys, which in the end will make our job easier when it comes to student reassignments, because we got something to other than what these guys bring to us as backup support from a comprehensive land study. But I think Mr. Walters has issues with it, so he has suggested that we put it on the action agenda, and we can do that for the 10th, and so that's what we'll do. We'll put it on the action agenda, and if anything else comes up between now and then, get your questions to Mr. Whitkey, copy it to me, and then we'll look at it, and on the 10th, we'll put it on the action agenda for then, and we'll make a decision. And that's the way we do business. Okay? Thank you, Mr. Whitkey and Mr. Burnett, for being here, and we'll be addressing this again on the 10th.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, board members, we're going to move on now to 7.5, and Mr. Whitkey's going to be with us again, and Mr. Burnett, if he cares to. And this is on the additional bid alternates for construction of the Northwest Cabarrus High School gym. The board has previously approved for the base bid to be done already. That's already out of the way. Now, this particular item here is to address the alternates that, and Mr. Whitkey's going to tell us about that, and then it'll be either an action item or a consent item. Mr. Whitkey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think what I'm going to do first is bring up a document that which needs to be turned around. Okay. Mike, do you know how was that?
Mr. Whitkey, which item are you on?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm
on
the presentation for the gymnasium.
We've got 4 documents.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, it'd be interesting.
On the actual document.
And it'll show rotate clockwise. Let's rotate it one time.
That's right there.
Right. Right click.
Not.
Mr. Whitkey, just put your cursor in the content section. Right click it, and it'll show you.
Rotate clockwise.
Okay.
Okay, where's our technology man? We got him. Thank you.
Well, for some reason I can't get rid of this box, but there we go. Well, what I'm trying to do is get you to the simple floor plan. Do we know how to get rid of this, Mike? Thank you. This was a presentation floor plan that the architects did for us, and I brought it tonight just simply to kind of talk about these alternates so that it maybe makes a little bit more sense as we get into them. The problem, I wish I had, I'll describe them to you. So there is a document that looks like this in your folder, but let me talk you through them, and let me give you a little bit of background. The gymnasium project started out at a much smaller scope of work. It was about $1.5 million initially as proposed and approved. It really just involved basically adding additional seating and an elevator and entry point on the west side, I believe it was, of the gymnasium. What we found, though, and it happened that there was an unfortunate accident with an athlete in another school district in a school gym that was designed the same way this is. And if you're familiar with Northwest Gym, you realize that the bleachers are raised up above the gym floor about 4.5 feet, 5 feet. And they sit on a concrete floor that is terminated by 2 concrete block walls at the sides of the gymnasium. There's very little runoff space, and the floor itself is very tight. And what happened in the other instance was that there was a wrestling competition, and the young athlete was thrown off the mat into the wall. His neck was broken. He was paralyzed for life. I believe it was the North Carolina's Athletic Association sent out a notice to all school districts that they were no longer going to support basically the use of these facilities, these types of facilities for competitive athletic events, and that it would be the responsibility of the districts to deal with ensuring and protecting athletes in the use of these facilities. So it was this board's decision on that basis to modify the scope of the project and to eliminate the walls, the supporting walls, drop the bleachers down, and create basically a single floor gymnasium. And that plan is what you see here. When we did that, when we looked at dropping the floor, the locker rooms and shower and toilet facilities are below the bleachers right now. So when you drop the floor down, your head space goes to about 4.5 feet in those areas. So we needed to find a way to add to the building and develop a scheme that would, a design that would basically provide new showers, locker rooms, and support space to allow those bleachers to come down to floor level. And so that is how this plan developed. And basically, we knew we could bring a project in that was within budget, and that's what we've done. And we're going forward with that part of the contract. The issue is, though, that there are remaining pieces or alternates to the work that we would like to see added. And I'll explain those for you. The alternates that we are recommending is, there are 4 of them. They are to replace the existing entrance canopy, which is someplace, here we go. Literally, if you're looking at the plan, it runs between this set of doors and a set of doors that is down here in the main school building. And the reason for it is it's a canopy that is it's very dated. It's as old as a gymnasium building. It's made of of steel units, and is not. It has a roof structure that has to be re-roofed on occasion because it does leak, thus eliminating the usefulness of its canopy. More importantly, though, it ties into the building in such a way that it does not easily allow us to modify access to the building and create, in this case, a weather vestibule, which in effect creates a more energy efficient space. So the idea is to allow us to make the building more energy efficient, create this vestibule area, and provide a longer lasting canopy. We're recommending accepting alternate number 8, which is at a cost of $143,129, which would allow the complete replacement of that and the addition of this weather vestibule. Alternate 9 is a replacement of the clear story windows in the building, and I will take you to that. That is shown as, I guess the last, it would be Gym 3186 is what it's indicated on your icons. This is at the, excuse me, at the top of the bleachers as they currently exist, and right now, these windows are a steel unit that is basically, the glass is painted over, and they're not energy efficient at all, and of course, painted over, they're opaque. What we're recommending is that we accept alternate number 9 at a cost of $55,591, which would allow us to completely replace these window units with energy efficient windows that would be translucent. They'd emit natural light to give daylighting into the gymnasium. It would reduce the amount of energy we use during the days because we wouldn't have to keep all the lights on all the time. And it would also provide a much more energy efficient environment for the gymnasium. Right now, we lose a lot of heat out of those window areas. And these, I'll take you to a different view. This is Gym EXT Northwest. And this just shows a view of the gymnasium. And the windows that we're talking about are on both sides, and they go right across the entire facade of the building at that upper level of the space. And so we would be, through this change in alternate, we would be replacing all of these windows on both the, I guess, Steve, is that east? Thank you. East and west sides of the building, and giving some real needed daylight back into it. I don't know if you've been in the gym, but if you do go in there, it's a pretty dark space. There's no windows in it whatsoever right now, at least none that emit light or permit light to enter the space. So that's alternate number 9.
Is this a particular photo taken with morning sunlight or afternoon sunlight?
It looks like it's after.
West side.
Yeah, it's the west side. It's looks like afternoon light, early afternoon from the shadows. So the materials we are using are it's a I don't want to use the name brand, but it's a fiberglass insulated panel. It emits or it transmits about 85 to 88%, I believe, of the natural light, but eliminates all glare and bright spots. So it's used a lot in institutional design today, and it's found to be extremely energy efficient. Alternate 10 is also one that we're recommending, and actually this alternate 10 is a replacement of the existing auditorium HVAC, which is in the main building. And the reason it was added to here, this project is a project that is part of my department's capital projects, which is assigned via a different funding source. We bid it with this project so we would get a more cost-efficient design. We use the same designers to do this as well as the auditorium project. And at the same time, in bidding it with a much larger project, we were able to get a very, very good price for that unit. So that cost is $77,298. And as I say, that funding is fully in place and can be used for this purpose. And then finally, alternate 11 is a replacement of the concession casework. And if I go back to the floor plan, I'll show you where that's at. I think I'll just leave it turned for the moment, but this green square in the floor plan, so you've come into the main building through the main entrance, and as you would typically go into the gymnasium here, the concessions, currently the concession stand is located here. We're expanding the concessions area to where this cursor is going. And in doing so, we're able to allow the concession stands to hopefully do a much nicer business, but also it allows us it allows us space to install additional casework to allow them to display and sell more product. So, and that cost for that alternative is $6,300. So the total, and I did some calculations, see if I can find them. As Kelly had mentioned, we have funds in place through the use of surplus monies from other QSCB projects to pay for this. It requires that transfer of funds as Ms. Klutz presented earlier. And of course, we do recommend acceptance of those alternates. The other alternates that, and let me get back to the bid tab. Sorry for all the jumping around, but the bid tab is the very first item on your list of items there that are attached. And if we get it up to the size we can see. Basically, there were quite a few alternates. There were a number of what we call zero alternates, and the ones that are sort of in this gray color on the left-hand side in these blocks, it was 1, 2, 5, 6, and 7, those were all zero alternates. So basically, they were saying, we will give you what you use as standard products in these areas at no additional cost. I did forget one other alternate. I'm sorry. We were talking about taking alternate number 4, which is accepting a cost of $5,345 to go with a Bosch fire alarm and security system. Bosch is a standard unit we use throughout all our schools, and it does cost a bit more, but it performs extremely well. And because of the remainder of the systems in the school, we'd like to have compatibility. Otherwise, we often have many operational problems if we don't have that. So we are recommending that we accept that alternate as well. And the only other ones that we're saying we don't want to accept are alternates 12, 13, and 14. Alternate 12, we don't feel that for the cost that they're offering, or the cost rather that they're charging, which is $84,500, we believe that working with the Train Corporation directly, that we'll be able to secure that warranty for a lesser sum of money. And we're working on that right now with them. Alternate number 13 is a cost for sound panels in the gymnasium. And normally we would install those, but in talking with the architects, we've increased the amount of acoustical ceiling tile in the gymnasium. We believe that will substantially reduce the sound problems in the gym. I didn't feel that $12,000 was a reasonable sum to begin with, but hearing that from the architects, I guess my feeling is at this point I'd like to see what the sound condition is once we get the space constructed. You can always add additional sound panels. So let's see where we are with the finished product, and if we need more, we'll add it at that time. And the last one, alternate 14, was actually a deduct of $4,300, and that was to go from the first quality wood floor in the gym to a lesser quality. And frankly, I think that's about 3 or 4 times less than what it should be. So I'm not recommending that the board accept that. I think that we should insist that we get the first-rate floor, and it'll last a lot longer, look a lot better for a much longer period of time. So with all that, and did you have it was 238 roughly, Kelly?
The alternates are 210, 365.
Plus the additional funds we would like to keep for contingency. Yep, so I think it's around $238,000 total. Yep.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wiki. Board members, now's the time for you to direct your questions to Mr. Wiki, reference the alternates, and you've got your cover letter on the front page here of your board docs. We'll start with Mr. Shoemaker on your side, and we can work our way down as you have your discussion with Mr. Wiki.
I agree with your assessment of the windows. I know that those are probably the original windows, and they're all single pane, and
yes,
and the iron is anything but nice. So what you're basically all this adds up to 210, 365, and you're going to use the final remainder 28,000 that we were talking about in a just previous budget amendment as money for contingency?
Yes, sir.
Is that what your plan is? And
yes,
that's
sir.
where that's how we match up to the budget amendment.
Correct.
Okay. Do we feel like this building is going to be? Are we putting a lot of energy efficient features into this building? And because obviously you're going to be putting in insulated tiles on this roof, which I probably don't think that roof was even insulated in the day that it was constructed. And what type of lighting are we going to put into the ceilings there?
I'm going to ask the architects to step up. I could answer some of those questions, but I don't know that I could answer it in the detail that they will. Steve Wallace from Morrisburg Architects. He's a project architect and designer for it.
Good evening. There we go. We are replacing all of the lights in the gymnasium with T5 fluorescent lamps. Right now they're metal halide, and it takes when lights go off, it takes an awful long time for them to come back up. With the fluorescents, they're instantaneous. They come right back up, and they're a lot more energy efficient than what you have there now. So that was in the base bid scope to do that lighting replacement.
And we also, we do use energy efficient plumbing fixtures. We are going to put, I think it's 4, it's our first use of them, 4 of the I call them solar tubes.
For daylighting.
Daylighting into the locker and shower areas. There's a lot of features that we will employ that.
With this, we are replacing the mechanical system in the existing gym.
Yeah.
So that'll be more energy efficient than what you have there now. That's the original equipment, so.
Yeah, believe it or not, the old unit, which is the age of the building, sits right above the center court. And we've had leaks where it's not in good shape. It needs to be replaced. So, and that is quite an old piece of equipment. So,
And the windows, light used to be a huge issue, sunlight coming in there, and because this is pretty much southwest facing, so it catches every bit of the afternoon sun.
Right.
They'll be able to shed the light.
Yeah, what we have planned to put in there is not glass. It's a translucent system that diffuses the light, so you don't have that. Because I'm going to assume that when that school was built, it just had clear glass in there. And the reason they painted it or did everything is because the solar heat gain coming through that window was probably, not to mention glare, probably was just unbelievable. So.
Well, when my kids went there 12 years ago, it was pretty much sunlight coming in there, and they used black paint and everything else in the world trying to obscure
So
that.
this is like it's not clear, but it's diffused. It's like a kind of a milky white. So it does, it's like 85% light comes in, but it's diffused light. So you're not going to have that high intense daylight coming through or sun coming in. It's diffused. So.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shoemaker. Ms. Carpenter?
Okay, my question may be one you may shoot me down right to begin with, but my question is, do you have to give your alternates to the same company that's doing your primary?
yes, unless they're willing to match prices of someone else, yes, we do.
Well, the reason I was saying, I was looking at some of the other companies that had the alternates, and some of them were less. And that's why I was saying, if we took the alternates that we chose and we added those up, could we do the alternates with one of the other ones? Because, for instance, look at our biggest thing, which they're wanting to charge $143,129. Well, you go across that the alternate 8. Well, one company wanted only $135,000. Look, alternate 8. All right, and then look at the windows, for instance. They were wanting $55,591. Well, look, and you can see that there was another company that wanted $50,000. That's $5,000 less. All right, but if you look and you add it down, which I've been, as you can see, I've been just going to town with this, looking to see if I took the alternates that we took and see that, we might could save another $5,000 to $6,000 or more. But I didn't know if we could do that.
No, you can't. What you'd normally have to do if you didn't want to accept the alternates from the given party, the low bidder, for the work, you'd have to rebid those pieces individually, and I guarantee you they won't come in at the price that these are now. It's typically you have to deal with the low bidder. If you accept his basic price, you have to deal with him on the alternates. Now, I will say that they have offered to work with us to see if they can find additional dollars in the project for us, and through some analysis and ideas that they've had as they've put their bid together, which is a good thing. And so we're and the Holden Company is a reputable firm. I know Steve's firm has done some work with them in the past. They have a good reputation. We believe them to be willing to work with us to do that. But no, you can't shop bids in that regard. You can't pick and choose from the list.
Well, I didn't know if you could just give the alternates to one and the other.
Yeah.
That
No,
was
I mean, you
my
could
que-
rebid that, but like I say, right now, to be quite honest with you, one of the difficult things too is we're pushing the time frame on this to the point, we had promised that we were going to get the project done by start of school, August 2013. We need to get this project moving. And so, because ordering times, everything is literally built from scratch. There's nothing on the shelf anymore, save maybe a piece of drywall or a piece of piping. But any piece of equipment that you order is built from scratch today throughout this country. So unless it's a window air conditioner. But so that really presses us into a very tight time frame to get all this work done, especially in light of we can't give the contract to the gymnasium until March, I believe.
Yeah, we figured March 4th, because that's
Yeah.
when, if Northwest Cabarrus goes to the championship, that's the cutoff date is March, they'll be done by March 4th.
Right.
And the
So
only
we have
other
those
question I
constraints.
had was, I noticed when you're doing the concession stand, you're going over a door. Is that not a big thing when you're going over that door and having to build a new door? Because you're going through concrete walls.
The reason we're moving the door is because right now, all traffic comes in and out of that door from that side of the gym, walking across the playing surface. We have an enormous amount of foot traffic across a surface you don't want to have foot traffic on. Well, it's a long story, but there's a lot of problems with schools with people coming in and walking on those gym floors. The high schools have very nice floors in them, and that kind of foot traffic unnecessarily is not good. So it's true, we're going to move the door, and there's going to be a cost attendant to that, but we're also going to eliminate this continuous walking across that corner of the gymnasium floor and keep that traffic off to the side. And that's very important for the life of the floor.
Okay, so that will oversee the cost of what it's going to cost to go through that brick wall?
Well, I can also add, we have to replace those doors anyway and make them wider, so it's not like we're creating, we had to widen them anyway because of the additional seating in the gym now, since we lowered everything on the floor. So it's not like we're just moving a door just for the concessions building. We were creating new doors
Oh, okay,
from the
okay.
start. So.
That's my only question. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Carpenter. Mr. Conger, you have your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sometimes I know that we get tunnel vision, and we've been talking about this project for so long that I'm literally ready to drive over there and put a shovel in the ground myself to get moving. But that being said, I'm really happy that there's 4 new people here to ask new questions, because sometimes we do, and I'm guilty of it. I want to get moving, and these guys are going to provide us the opportunity to make sure that we check, hey, have we done what we need to do to get where we're going? So I'm glad you guys are here asking questions. I did want to point out a couple things, and when we took this project on, we opened ourselves up for a little bit of criticism because it was the most substantial project on the whole list. And a lot of other schools and a lot of other people in the community could point and say, well, wait a minute, we're not getting that. And they're getting a big chunk of what you're doing. But I just wanted to make a quick reminder that there were 4 things that we were trying to accomplish here. It wasn't just one, and then if any one on its own, we probably wouldn't have done the project. But the first one was ADA compliance.
Yes, sir.
The second one had an academic component, PE classes being able to now use the gym full size where currently they can't. Seating capacity equality, where Northwest currently cannot host the conference basketball tournament, which is direct revenue out of their pocket. They can't do it, and every other school can, and they can't. And then the safety aspect of it that you mentioned before, I know it was specific to wrestling. I'm not sure about basketball, but it probably wasn't worth finding out if it was to basketball as well. So those 4 things really got the ball rolling to make sure we got this project done. As we got through the bids, the alternates I think are worth doing. I think they're well thought out. The canopy I was a little lukewarm on, but I guess the more if you go out there and you really realize the positioning of the building and the walkway and the traffic pattern, I kind of warmed up to it. To me, that was the one that I just wasn't too sure about. But Mr. Chairman, I'm here to tell you that I'm ready to go. I'm okay with the alternates as they're shown. Again, the day we break ground, I'm going to be very, very excited. I did want to mention that on the substantial completion date on the milestone report, we're showing January of 14, and I think you just mentioned start of school. So
Yes.
I guess if the goal is, I got nervous when I saw the January, knowing
Sure.
that we have a drop dead date of April 2014, but knowing that we think we can do better than that, and that's kind of the back end of the substantial completion, I'm much more comfortable with the schedule.
Thank you, Mr. Kiger, for your comments. Mr. Walters, your comments?
Yeah, I appreciate your analysis as well. Just looking at it, though, can you explain a little bit more about the 143,000 for a walkway that's, what, 60 or 75 feet? And it's like $1,900 a foot.
It's
Why would
not
it-
just a walkway.
Uh-huh.
We're replacing at both the east and the west entrance. There's a storefront system. It's a 14 feet high, and that's the entrance into the building. We're taking all that out and putting in new systems that are more energy efficient. And at the west, which is basically the main entrance where all the students go and the public goes during a basketball game, we're creating a vestibule, which puts another storefront system up there.
So that's all part of that?
It's all part of the whole thing, yeah.
That answers my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walters. Okay, Mr. Harrison.
No questions. They've already been asked. Thank you, and answered quite well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Mr. Phillips.
Okay, thanks. I went out and toured the facility last Friday, and Jason Adams, who's the athletic director, gave me a tour of what they've got, and it was a pretty compelling argument that he had. I definitely support the base project. I have a couple of requests on the two energy efficiency related alternates. I would like to see some type of a payback calculation so that we know just how much we're getting from investing this money. And in the future, I would like to see that on all energy efficiency related projects, because you can go overboard and spending hundreds of dollars to save a few cents a year. And the other question I had was on the covered walkway, and you can see it really well in that exterior photo that you've got, and it actually extends further off on one side to get to the main building. So what I understand is in order to do the modifications, you have to take that existing one down, and the current budget doesn't have money to put it back. So the only question I have is there any other gym in the district where students have to walk in an uncovered walkway from the main building to the gym? I want to make sure that we're not going to do something here and not address a similar situation in one of the other high schools.
To my knowledge, and I think I've been in all of them now, none of them, no, they're all interior.
And I would just add one more thing. When I went over to Northwest, I mentioned to my son, who is a student at a rival high school, that I was going to go look at the Northwest gym because it needs to be renovated. He happens to travel with the Cox Mill basketball team because he does the filming, so he's seen all the gyms in the district. And he said, oh, yeah, they definitely have the worst facilities in the district. So he's an unbiased source, and he definitely feels that this is needed too. So I support the project.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Phillips. Okay, just for my own self here, how much do we have built in for contingency on this? Because I've been looking at these alternates 4, 8, 9, 10, and 11. And with 10 coming out of facility and maintenance money already, which won't be part of the QSCB project here. I had $210,265. Does that sound right, Kelly?
210,365.
Okay. What's $100, right? All right. But how much contingency do we have built in?
About 28,000.
So that's the difference up to, because because ours has a total cost of $287,663. Is
But that includes the,
77,000?
it includes, yes, the alternate 10 funding.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay, so it includes that as well.
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, I mean, I've been ready to move on this for, since we've been talking about it, so I'm good with it also. So what's the pleasure of the board? Action or consent on 10th?
Consent.
Everybody? Okay, everybody's consent then. Hey, we got a consent item tonight. Okay, Mr. Wiki, so we got on the 10th, we have this on the consent agenda.
That's
Okay.
terrific. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wiki, and thank you, board members. So I'm going to do a recap. Now, we'll go back to 7.1, which is the budget amendment, and I think it proves Mr. Phillips's point pretty clearly. And, Mr. Phillips, I appreciate you bringing that to our attention. I mean, it's hard to vote for a budget amendment when you hadn't voted for the money that you're going to spend it for, so it's a good item. But now, though, that we have approved for the consent agenda on the gym additions alternates there, so what's the pleasure of the board on 7.1 now for the budget amendments? Everybody consent now? Okay, so that will go. Ms. Klutz, you have your item on the consent agenda for then. All right, let's just do a recap real quick, like 7.1, and this is for the benefit of our board clerk and for our own clear understanding. 7.1, the budget amendments will be going to consent. 7.2, the policies will be going to the action agenda, and Dr. Sane will be expecting your questions and emails copied to me. 7.3, we took care of that. 7.4, the ORED, Mr. Walters had requested that it go to the action, so we'll be voting on that on the 10th. And any more questions or concerns that you have, you might want to direct those to Mr. Whitkey, reference the ORED. All right, everybody clear? All right. Well, with that being said, board members, we're finishing up here for our first meeting, and unless there's no other comments, I want to say good night to the viewing audience, and we'll see you back on the 10th, and so I need now a motion that this meeting be adjourned.
So moved.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Okay, good night to everyone.